Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was a dictator who ruled the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s until his death in 1953. Stalin rose to power after the death of Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union, and he implemented a series of brutal policies to consolidate his control. Stalin's rule was characterized by totalitarianism, political repression, and the use of propaganda to maintain power. Stalin implemented a series of economic plans that led to rapid industrialization, but also caused widespread famine and hardship, particularly in rural areas. He also pursued aggressive policies in foreign affairs, including the annexation of several Eastern European countries after World War II. Stalin's rule was also marked by widespread purges and repression, during which millions of people were executed or sent to labor camps. This period, known as the Great Purge, was intended to eliminate perceived enemies of the state, but led to the deaths of millions of innocent people. Despite these atrocities, Stalin is also credited with leading the Soviet Union to victory in World War II, albeit at a high cost in human lives. Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, often referred to as Chairman Mao, was a Chinese communist revolutionary who became the founding father of the People's Republic of China, PRC, which he ruled as the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, from its establishment in 1949 until his death in 1976. Mao is widely regarded as one of the most important figures in modern world history. Mao's rule was characterized by a series of ambitious social and economic campaigns, including the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, which had profound and often devastating effects on China's society, economy, and culture. Under Mao's leadership, China underwent significant social and political transformation, including the collectivization of agriculture, the industrialization of the economy, and the suppression of political dissent. His policies, however, also led to widespread famine, economic hardship, and political persecution, resulting in the deaths of millions of people. Idi Amin. Idi Amin was a Ugandan military officer and politician who ruled Uganda from 1971 to 1979. He came to power in a military coup, overthrowing the government of Milton Obote. Amin's regime was characterized by human rights abuses, political repression. He expelled Uganda's Asian minority, seized their businesses and properties, and engaged in brutal crackdowns on perceived opponents, leading to widespread violence and thousands of deaths. Amin's rule was also marked by a cult of personality, with grandiose titles such as His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and Conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular, being used to refer to him. And by the way, this is not a joke. In 1979, Amin's regime was overthrown by a coalition of Ugandan exiles and Tanzanian forces, leading to his exile first to Libya and later to Saudi Arabia, where he lived until his death in 2003. He was never brought to justice for his crimes. Pol Pot. Pol Pot was a Cambodian revolutionary and politician who led the Khmer Rouge regime from 1975 to 1979. During his time in power, he imposed a radical form of agrarian socialism, aiming to create an ideal communist society. Pol Pot's policies led to the deaths of an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people through execution, forced labor, and starvation. This period, known as the Cambodian Genocide, was characterized by brutal repression, the dismantling of urban areas, and the persecution of perceived enemies of the state. Pol Pot's regime was eventually overthrown by Vietnamese forces in 1979, leading to his retreat to the jungle, where he remained until his death in 1998. He was never brought to trial for his crimes, and I think he was happy with what he did. Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il was the supreme leader of North Korea from 1994 until his death in 2011. He succeeded his father, Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, and continued his father's authoritarian rule. During Kim Jong-il's leadership, North Korea faced severe economic difficulties, including famine and widespread poverty, while the regime maintained strict control over all aspects of society. The country also faced international isolation due to its nuclear ambitions and human rights abuses. Kim Jong-il's leadership style was characterized by a cult of personality, with propaganda promoting him as a near-divine figure. He also pursued a military-first policy, prioritizing the military over other sectors of society. Kim Jong-il's death in 2011 led to his son Kim Jong Un assuming power, continuing the family's dynastic rule over North Korea. The Austrian Painter. The Austrian painter, born in 1889 in Austria, rose to infamy as the dictator of Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. He initially pursued a career as an artist but failed to gain entry to art school. During World War I, the Austrian painter served in the German army and was deeply affected by Germany's defeat. He joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi Party, in 1919, quickly becoming its leader due to his oratory skills and propaganda tactics. In 1923, the Austrian painter attempted a coup known as the Beer Hall Putsch, which failed, resulting in his imprisonment. While in prison, he wrote Mein Kampf, outlining his ideology of Aryan racial superiority and anti-Semitism. Upon his release, he restructured the Nazi Party to gain power through democratic means. The economic instability of the Great Depression in the late 1920s and early 1930s helped the Austrian painter gain popular support by promising economic revival, national rejuvenation, and the eradication of perceived enemies like Jews and communists. In 1933, the Austrian painter was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He quickly consolidated power, using the Reichstag fire as a pretext to pass the Reichstag Fire Decree, which suspended civil liberties and allowed for the arrest of political opponents. The Enabling Act followed, giving the Austrian painter dictatorial powers. He established a totalitarian regime employing propaganda, censorship, and state control over all aspects of life. Under the Austrian painter's rule, Germany rearmed and pursued an aggressive foreign policy, leading to the annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland. In 1939, the Austrian painter's invasion of Poland triggered World War II. During the war, his genocidal policies culminated in the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews and millions of other victims, including Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and others deemed undesirable. The Austrian painter's military ambitions initially saw significant successes, but by 1943, the tide turned against Germany. The Allied forces steadily advanced, and by 1945, they were closing in on Berlin. Facing inevitable defeat, the Austrian painter committed suicide squad on April 30th, 1945. Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini was an Italian political leader who founded and led the National Fascist Party. Born on July 29, 1883, he initially worked as a journalist before becoming involved in politics. In 1922, Mussolini became the Prime Minister of Italy after leading a successful coup known as the March on Rome. As Prime Minister, Mussolini gradually dismantled democratic institutions, established a totalitarian regime, and declared himself dictator, taking the title Il Duce. His regime emphasized nationalism, militarism, and the suppression of political opposition. Mussolini sought to restore Italy to its former Roman glory and embarked on aggressive foreign policies, including the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. During World War II, Mussolini allied Italy with Nazi Germany and Japan, forming the Axis powers. However, Italy's military failures and the Allied invasion in 1943 led to his downfall. He was removed from power and arrested, but later rescued by German forces and installed as the leader of a puppet state in northern Italy. Mussolini's rule ended in 1945 when he was captured and executed by Italian partisans on April 28, 1945. Kim Jong Un. Kim Jong Un, the current supreme leader of North Korea, is widely regarded as a dictator due to his absolute control over the country and the repressive nature of his regime. Kim Jong Un's dictatorship is characterized by several key factors. Firstly, he exercises complete control over the political, economic, and social life of North Korea. The country operates under a totalitarian system, where dissent is not tolerated, and any opposition to the regime is met with harsh punishment. Secondly, Kim Jong-un maintains his grip on power through a cult of personality that has been cultivated around him and his family. He is portrayed as a benevolent and wise leader, with his image being prominently displayed across the country. The regime uses propaganda and censorship to control the flow of information and ensure that Kim Jong-un is seen as infallible. Kim Jong-un's aggressive pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles has also contributed to his negative image. His regime has conducted several nuclear tests and has repeatedly threatened its neighbors with nuclear strikes, leading to increased tensions in the region. Hideki Tojo. Hideki Tojo was a Japanese military leader and prime minister who served during World War II. As prime minister, Tojo was a key figure in Japan's decision to enter World War II, particularly with the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. which brought the United States into the war. He oversaw Japan's military operations throughout the Pacific and Southeast Asia, aiming to establish a Japanese empire. Tojo's leadership was marked by authoritarianism, militarism, and a strict adherence to the ideology of the Japanese Empire. His policies included the suppression of dissent and the imposition of harsh measures in occupied territories. However, Japan's military setbacks and resource shortages ultimately led to his resignation in July 1944. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Tojo was arrested, tried by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, and found guilty of war crimes, including ordering atrocities against civilians and prisoners of war. He was executed on December 23, 1948. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq from 1979 until 2003. Born on April 28, 1937, he rose through the ranks of the Ba'ath Party and became known for his ruthless leadership style. During his rule, Saddam centralized power, suppressed dissent, and initiated aggressive foreign policies. He waged war with Iran from 1980 to 1988 and invaded Kuwait in 1990, leading to the Gulf War with an international coalition led by the United States. His authoritarian rule and involvement in regional conflicts brought Iraq into isolation and economic hardship. Despite initial economic and social reforms in 2003, following the US-led invasion of Iraq, which led to the death of more than 1 million Iraqis, Saddam was captured, tried by an Iraqi tribunal, and executed on December 30, 2006. Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad is the current president of Syria, succeeding his father Hafez al-Assad in 2000. Born on September 11, 1965, since assuming power, Assad has faced significant challenges, including the outbreak of the Syrian civil war in 2011, which began as a result of protests demanding political reform. His government's response to the uprising escalated into a brutal conflict involving multiple factions, including rebel groups and international actors. Throughout the civil war, Assad's regime has been accused of widespread human rights abuses, including the use of chemical weapons against civilians, torture, and targeting hospitals and schools. Despite international condemnation and sanctions, Assad has retained power. The Syrians may have disagreed on many things, but they all shared a common hatred for Bashar al-Assad. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire, is often characterized as a dictator due to his autocratic rule and the brutal tactics he employed to expand his empire. Genghis Khan consolidated his power through a combination of military might and strategic alliances. He established a highly centralized government, with himself at the pinnacle of authority. His rule was absolute, and dissent was met with swift and severe punishment. One of the main reasons Genghis Khan is hated by many is the sheer scale of the devastation he wrought. His military campaigns were marked by widespread destruction, pillaging, and massacre. Cities that resisted his conquest were often razed to the ground and their populations massacred. Another factor that contributes to Genghis Khan's negative reputation is his treatment of conquered peoples. While he did offer generous terms to those who surrendered without resistance, those who resisted faced brutal reprisals. This, combined with the widespread destruction caused by his armies, has led many to view him as a merciless tyrant. Leopold II. Leopold II, the King of the Belgians from 1865 to 1909, is often remembered as a dictator due to his brutal exploitation of the Congo Free State, which he privately controlled as his own colony from 1885 to 1908. Leopold's dictatorship in the Congo was characterized by several key factors. Firstly, he maintained absolute control over the colony, with no regard for the welfare of the Congolese people. He exploited the region's resources, particularly rubber, for his own personal gain, enriching himself and his supporters at the expense of the local population. Secondly, Leopold's rule in the Congo was marked by extreme brutality. He employed a mercenary force, the Force Publique, to enforce his will and extract resources from the local population. The Force Publique was notorious for its harsh treatment of the Congolese people, including widespread torture, mutilation, and forced labor. Leopold's dictatorship in the Congo was also characterized by a lack of regard for human life. Estimates suggest that millions of Congolese people died as a direct result of his policies, either through violence, starvation, or disease.